No one noticed the old man at first. He stood quietly near the entrance of the crowded electronics store, shoulders slightly bent, hands trembling as he held a small cloth bag that looked far too light to carry anything valuable. People rushed past him with shopping lists and impatient expressions, the hum of air conditioners and ringing phones filling the space. Then, in a single violent moment, everything stopped. A sharp sound cut through the noise. A raised hand, a stunned silence. When the salesman's hand came down against the old man, the air itself seemed to freeze, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of humanity, take a moment right now to like this video, comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us who we really are. The old man did not fall, though it looked like he might. His body swayed, his knees bending slightly as he struggled to keep his balance. The cloth bag slipped from his hand and landed on the polished floor, its contents spilling out old coins, a folded receipt, and a small, worn photograph with faded edges. People gasped, some stepping back, others instinctively reaching forward but stopping, unsure of what to do. The salesman, a young man with a stiff uniform and a face tight with frustration, stood frozen too, as if he himself could not believe what he had just done. Moments earlier, the situation had seemed ordinary. The old man had entered the store slowly, his eyes scanning the bright displays as if everything inside belonged to a world he barely understood. He had approached the counter with careful steps, his voice barely audible as he tried to explain something. He wasn't asking for charity, and he wasn't causing trouble. He simply wanted to return a small radio that no longer worked, something he had saved weeks to buy, so he could listen to the news at night in his one-room home. But rules were rules, the salesman had said. No receipt, no return. The old man tried again, pointing to the bag, to the coins, to the photograph, as if his entire life story could somehow explain what paperwork could not. The salesman's patience had worn thin. The line behind the old man grew longer, sighs louder, eyes sharper. Stress pressed down on the young man's shoulders, targets to meet, a manager watching from afar, a life that felt like it was slipping out of his control. And in that moment, instead of choosing empathy, he chose power. He raised his hand, not fully understanding that once raised, it would come down and change everything. As the old man bent to collect his things, no anger crossed his face. There was no shouting, no accusation, only a deep, quiet sadness that seemed heavier than the slap itself. His hands shook as he picked up the photograph last. It showed a younger version of himself, standing beside a woman with bright eyes and a gentle smile. Time had stolen the color from the image, but not the love it captured. He pressed it against his chest for a brief second before placing it back in the bag. That was when something shifted in the room. A woman near the entrance began to cry softly, covering her mouth. A father pulled his young son closer, whispering something about respect. A security guard, who had seen countless arguments and petty conflicts, felt a strange tightness in his chest that he couldn't explain. Even the salesman felt it, a sudden weight, a realization that the man in front of him was not weak, not small, but carrying a lifetime of quiet endurance. The old man straightened himself slowly. His back was still bent, but there was dignity in the way he stood, as if pain had been a familiar companion for so long that it no longer had the power to break him. He did not look at the salesman with hatred. Instead, his eyes moved around the store, lingering briefly on the faces of strangers who now felt like witnesses to something far bigger than a simple dispute. Outside, the city continued as if nothing had happened. Cars honked, people laughed, phones buzzed, but inside that store, time felt suspended. The manager finally approached, his confident stride faltering as he took in the scene. He saw the old man, the spilled coins, the pale face of the salesman, and the crowd that had fallen unnervingly quiet. Something about it unsettled him deeply. The manager bent down and helped the old man gather the remaining items. In doing so, he noticed the coins, old, mismatched, some so worn they barely held their shape. They were not the coins of someone careless with rules, but of someone who counted every small blessing. The manager's throat tightened as he realized what kind of man stood before him. The old man was guided to a chair. Someone offered him water. Someone else offered to call a doctor. He refused gently, shaking his head, insisting he was fine. What he wanted most was to leave, to disappear back into the quiet corner of the world where he would not be a burden, not an inconvenience. But the crowd would not let him vanish so easily. A young woman stepped forward and paid for a new radio without hesitation. Another customer placed a folded bill into the old man's bag. A third offered to walk him home. Each small act of kindness felt like a ripple spreading outward, undoing the damage of that single raised hand. The salesman watched all of this, his chest burning with something that felt like shame but deeper, heavier. For the first time in a long while, he truly looked at the man he had struck. He saw his own grandfather in the lines of the old man's face, remembered hands that once held him steady when the world felt too big. He remembered being taught that strength was not about control but compassion, and he realized how far he had drifted from that lesson. The manager made a decision then, one that surprised everyone. He apologized publicly to the old man, not as a corporate gesture, but as a human being. He offered a full refund, a new radio, and something more valuable, respect. He turned to the salesman, his voice firm but not cruel, making it clear that actions had consequences, but also that growth was possible if one chose to face their mistakes. The old man listened quietly. When he finally nodded, it was not approval that shone in his eyes, but forgiveness. Forgiveness offered not because it was deserved, but because carrying anger would only add to the weight he already bore. As the old man was escorted out into the sunlight, something remarkable happened. People began clapping, not loudly, not as a celebration, but softly, steadily, like a shared heartbeat. The sound followed him to the door, wrapping around him like a warm blanket. He paused, turned back for just a moment, and gave a small bow of his head, his eyes glistening. That night, the story spread, not because of the slap, but because of what followed. People talked about the quiet strength of the old man, the unexpected kindness of strangers, and the way one moment of cruelty had been transformed into a lesson in humanity. The video footage circulated online, but what moved people was not the act itself. It was the silence afterward, the choices people made when they could have looked away. The salesman did not sleep that night. He replayed the scene over and over, each time feeling the weight of his actions settle deeper into his soul. The next morning, he returned to work early. He requested to speak to the manager, not to argue, but to accept whatever consequences awaited him. More importantly, he asked for the old man's address. He needed to do something, not to erase the past, but to honor it. Days later, the salesman stood outside a small, worn building, holding a paper bag with groceries and a new radio tucked carefully inside. When the door opened, the old man looked surprised, then cautious. The salesman bowed deeply, his eyes filled with regret, his posture stripped of pride. He placed the bag gently on the floor and stepped back, leaving without expecting forgiveness, without asking for anything in return. The old man watched him go, then slowly picked up the bag. Inside, beneath the radio, he found the photograph he had dropped that day, now placed inside a clean envelope to protect it. His hands trembled as he held it, tears finally escaping the eyes that had held so much pain in silence. If this story is touching your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps spread messages of kindness and reminds the world that compassion still matters. The impact of that single moment continued to ripple outward. The store implemented training focused not on sales, but on empathy. The salesman, now humbled, became one of its strongest advocates for patience and understanding. And the old man, once invisible, became a symbol, not of weakness, but of resilience. Just before the story ends, I want to ask you something special. Please comment below with one word that this story made you feel. Your words matter, and someone reading them might find comfort in knowing they are not alone. In the end, it was never about a slap or a rule or a broken radio. It was about a choice. A raised hand meant to assert control, and the quiet response that reminded everyone watching that true power lies in compassion. What happened next did not just shock everyone, it changed them.